Now, joining me on the news tonight is Abi Baiyewu of Global Rights.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. You're welcome, Ma.
Thank you.
So, moving straight into the business of the day, what would you say informed the sensitization program your organization is embarking on?
So the press briefing was held ahead of the launch of the Fusion Center, the Civil Society, Joint Action Civil Society Fusion Center, which I will be coordinating, that has been developed to deal with electoral violence specifically. As you know, there have been a lot of violence in our country, and we've lost a lot of people to violent killings across the country and in different crises. And as the elections approach, it is anticipated that the spate of violence will get worse. The question is, do we sit back as Nigerians and watch the violence unfold, or do we act? We've chosen to act. And our action is to call for an end to violence in elections, like we have experienced in past elections, and at the same time to issue a warning to all actors that we will be demanding accountability, and we're monitoring and documenting violations across the country.
Okay. There are some international conventions and agreements protecting citizens which Nigeria has appended its signature to. So why is it difficult to adhere to these ratifications given?
Apart from the international instruments, we also have local laws that guide our conduct as citizens, but also guide our public conduct during elections. However, you would find that in Nigeria, we find it easy to ratify these instruments, but not to implement them. Our biggest problem has been implementation, and it points to the weakness of our institutions. Impunity thrives because our institutions are weak and there's poor political will on the parts of our political leaders. If we as citizens continue to allow them the laxity of choosing what is important rather than what is important to us, then we will continue to have that air of impunity.
Impunity.
Yes.
Okay, so who are you targeting with this current sensitization program?
This targets all actors, and all actors will include the political parties, the government, the security forces, INEC, and voters.
Okay. So if this involves all actors, like you have said, how do you intend to take it to the grassroots and not just leave it as an Abuja affair?
Members of the coalition are drawn from all over the country, and if you had been at the briefing this morning, you would have found that we had members of the coalition from Bauchi, from Rivers, from Lagos, from Zamfara, from across the country. And so each state has its own situation center, but then all the information is collated and analyzed at the center and then diffused again back to the states.
Okay. So what advocacy are you putting in place to ensure certain issues that have cropped up about the amended Electoral Act that could spur crisis do not escalate, especially certain provisions of the Act which has to do with the date for campaign, etc.?
The Electoral Act itself, will not incite violence, whether it is passed or not passed. The provisions are and they are strong. The hardest part would be, of course, implementing them. What measures are in place then to ameliorate the violence that may erupt from other things? I think it's more of the insightful speeches of politicians and their supporters that may incite violence, and not the Electoral Act itself. The Act itself is strong and is quite sound.
What, in your honest assessment, honest opinion, is responsible for the recent crisis rocking state of House of Assemblies? 2 weeks ago, it was Anambra. Just last week, it was Akwa Ibom.
Of course, you know that this is the season for horse trading and capturing the high grounds of the political season. As you know, the crisscrossing of carpets across the political parties themselves have consequences, and what we see now are the aftershocks of that at the state level, having gone through the federal levels. So how do we deal with that? I think that as citizens that people should vote based on issue-based and not just on the parties, the personalities and the issues in which they present.
Thank you very much for joining us tonight.
Thank you for having me.